This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Game night is one of many traditions that has shifted with the times. Today, Where We Live, we learn about the games people are playing with each other online as social distancing continues. Coming up, we hear why Nintendo's Animal Crossing New Horizons is so addictive. If you haven't heard of it yet, hang tight. If you're not into video games, that's all right too. You can play Pictionary and even Bridge online using Google Hangouts and Zoom. Now don't throw your hands up. Our guests will help you sort out how this all works. And later, if you'd rather just de-stress by watching the latest shows on streaming services, NPR's Eric Deggans joins us with tips on what to watch now that most of us have already binge-watched Ozark and Tiger King. Now, I was inspired for today's show after hearing producer Carmen Baskoff talk about game nights with her family in Tennessee. Here's Carmen explaining why her love of games hasn't ended in this pandemic.
So last Saturday, I was setting up a Zoom call, but for once, it wasn't for work.
I actually only have 2 spades, and I have 6 hearts.
This time, I was using Zoom to play Bridge with my parents and sister, who are all isolating together back in Tennessee. I'd been learning to play Bridge pre-quarantine, so when the pandemic began, I decided to take my family along for the ride. Now that they didn't have anything better to do during social distancing, we've been using a website, Trickster Cards, to deal out a virtual deck and run gameplay, but we like having a Zoom meeting running for table talk, especially because we're all still learning.
Means she has a ton of points and a balanced hand. It's critical for me to tell her what I have a lot of cards in. And so in order to tell her that I have a lot of spades,
That's my dad talking, trying to work out a bidding strategy. I love playing games, and Bridge is just one of the many card and board games that brings up my super competitive side when I get together with friends. But since COVID began, my board game nights have had to switch to happening virtually. Early on in the pandemic, I learned about the website boardgamearena.com. It's an online interface for playing a bunch of different popular board games, things like Seven Wonders, Carcassonne, or Sushi Go. So now pretty much all of my free time in the evenings is filled up playing virtual versions of all of my favorite games with friends and family. We've gotten pretty intense about a board game called Puerto Rico, which I probably play about 3 times a week these days.
Oh, we got a free corn. Dang, that's lucky.
My crew of college friends and I, we're now all scattered across the country. We've actually been keeping in better touch by holding weekly Puerto Rico matches.
Well, Zach also has the factory.
Yeah.
Ugh.
People both got the factory, but then I didn't have any factories left.
My dad's a big fan of the Puerto Rico game too, but we haven't managed to get my mom on board yet.
The game is so long. It has this minuscule writing on everything, and it's very complicated, and you have a hard time reading all the things.
Are you talking about Puerto Rico?
Right.
Well, the good thing is we have a lot of time to kill. So my goal is to bring her round to the game after all, before the pandemic ends. We'll see how I do.
That was Where We Live producer Carmen Baskoff. And joining us now on Zoom, our first guest, Matt Fantastic, game designer and co-owner of Elm City Games in New Haven. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
So like Carmen, did you grow up playing a lot of games with your family?
I did. It was a huge moment in my life when I was invited to join the family Dungeons & Dragons game. That marked my transition to adulthood. It was my nerd bar mitzvah that I got when I was 5 years old.
We'll be talking about Dungeons & Dragons in a little bit. But let's talk more about, so you're a co-owner again of Elm City Games in New Haven. Obviously, businesses are closed during this pandemic. So before it happened, tell us about the kind of people that were coming to your shop and how it all worked.
Yeah, so we do have a retail shop, but our main thing is that we have an enormous game library and operate as sort of a game club. So people can get day passes, or we have a ton of monthly members, things like that. People come in and they play games. We do organized events. We do just open game nights. We do things based around different specific games. We also host things like the New Haven Game Makers Guild meetings and then play testing for them. So we do a lot of things centered around people getting together in physical space and sitting around a table together. As far as demographics, we certainly I would say we trend the most between mid-20s to mid-30s, sort of that young professional vibe. But we definitely have a huge contingent of people that are older, and then a handful of younger people as well.
So, Matt, when the shutdowns had to begin, how did you and your staff transition and think about ways to still engage your customers in an online way?
Yeah, so obviously, running an analog get-together club it doesn't really work particularly well when you're social distancing. So for us, the most important thing has been trying to keep the community engaged with each other. For a lot of people, we are very much their social activity. Beyond just the playing of games, being sort of a club. We have people that'll come in on a Wednesday evening on their way home from work with a six-pack and see what people are up to. We are very much part of third place theory, which is much bigger, but basically the idea that you have work, home, and then there's a third place that people like to go. Traditionally, that's been like pubs, things like that. But for us, so many of our people are used to this space being the center of their sort of social lives outside of work. And for us, it was keeping everybody together. So we've been doing, events on Zoom. We've been doing game nights. We have some pretty active digital communities on Discord or Facebook, and then just kind of giving people updates and continuing to do it. For a while, our Instagram pretty much was 100%, memes, because we didn't really have anything to talk about for the business too much. But hey, we might as well, take advantage of that people look at our stuff and give everybody a little smile, while we're doing it.
Yeah. You're hearing Matt Fantastic on Zoom today here on Where We Live. He's a game designer and co-owner of Elm City Games in New Haven, Connecticut. Today we're focused on the ways people are still trying to have fun remotely, playing games online. Later on, talking about what you're watching. But Matt, part of the show too is hearing from people about how they're connecting with their friends and family despite social distancing. So here's the number to call, 888-720-WNPR. That's 888-720-9677. We want to hear again how you're staying connected. Matt, tell us about some of the games. Walk us through what you and your staff have learned that might work better remotely, and what kind of apps or websites can people go to play these games online?
Yeah, so the first and easiest really is using Zoom or Google Hangouts or a similar video conferencing app. There are so many games that are easily transitionable. If you especially look at some of the old parlor games like charades or Pictionary that was already mentioned, like those are just really easy to play in that kind of space where you don't need stuff. And then, there's other things. Last night I was on a live stream show with the designers of a game called Inhuman Conditions, which is a 2-player game that is basically the robot test from Blade Runner. So one player plays as the detective, the other player plays as potentially a robot, and you're interviewing each other. It's this amazing, brilliant, kind of bizarre experience. And obviously it is easily playable via any teleconferencing software. And we found that in particular, given the sort of tech nature of the game, that playing via screens is actually a really mood enhancing experience. Nothing's going to, I think nothing is going to completely replace the experience of sitting across the table and looking at somebody, but that's one that is really interestingly a very different and great experience remotely.
Matt, we heard from Tim on Twitter who writes that wondering if we could talk about Tabletop Simulator as a way to play board games remotely. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so Tabletop Simulator is just that. It is a sort of virtual tabletop space where you can put art on various physical assets that you then move around. It's almost like a virtual reality tabletop without actually being virtual reality. It's just kind of on the screen. I guess you can do VR in it as well. And that is great for people that are experienced game players and also relatively tech experienced as well. It's not the most intuitive interface, but the bigger stumbling block for a lot of people is that there is zero rules enforcement. So you might download a game on your phone that is a board game version. Asmodee Digital does a ton of great stuff. So I'd highly recommend checking out their work. Direwolf Digital also does a lot of great stuff. But those enforce the rules, whereas Tabletop Simulator, you're just moving stuff around, and there's no one. It's like a regular table. So, there's no way to know if you're doing it right or wrong, or you're moving stuff weirdly. So that's not a great way to learn games. So you're trying to bring in maybe part of your family that's not as experienced. That's maybe not the best choice, but it's a great platform.
You mentioned Zoom. I have a closet full of board games, mostly kids games because of the age of my children. But when we think about Yahtzee or other games where you have a physical board and dice, but still managing to connect with friends and family on Zoom, how will that all work? Can you maybe help people through it if they haven't tried?
Yeah, so we'll use Yahtzee as an example because that's super easy. So what we would do is tell everyone to go online and download a Yahtzee score sheet. The Yahtzee especially, they're widely available. Personally, I suggest triple Yahtzee, which I find a little bit more interesting. But you get a Yahtzee score sheet, then everybody can probably scrounge up 5 6-sided dice. And if not, worst case, one person can roll for everyone. It's less fun, because rolling dice is great. Everybody has their score sheet. You hop onto Zoom, and then you just kind of take turns rolling dice. For many games, and something that we found, especially given Elm City Games, is that really games are a vehicle for social interaction. They give some structure to the time you're spending together. Obviously games in and of themselves are great experiences, but a lot of it is about having something to do, part of that connection. Our weekly big family call, we've been playing games as well, and Yahtzee is there. It's easy. You can do it. I love that Carmen was playing bridge. That's insane, because bridge is just such a hard game to learn. But really it's about choosing something that you are comfortable with, and then using the tools that are there to do that. I think it's fun to learn new games, but mastery of the systems, using games that you do already know is going to be the best way to proceed in that space.
What about the game code names, especially if one player has the game? That's another one that's easy to do remotely.
It is a mixed easy to do.
Okay.
One thing that I will caution people that are not necessarily gamers that are going to look up some of these things is that for a lot of our people, it can be difficult to step outside the bubble, and so what we consider easy may not be as intuitive. So Codenames does involve a little bit of finagling, more so than something like a Yahtzee where you basically play it the same. But yeah, it's great. I mean, there's tons of guides. I highly recommend the Board Game Geek Guide to Distance Gaming. So you can just put in Board Game Geek Distance Gaming Guide, and it'll pop up. It has a whole bunch of games that are great for playing online. Codenames is included on this list, and it sort of explains how to do it remotely.
Nice.
And
we'll make sure that we tweet that out at Where We Live. Our listeners can join us too. What are you playing these days remotely? 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Justin's calling from Bethany. Justin, go ahead.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good.
So what's your question or comment?
Oh yeah, well I've wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons forever, and I was making plans, week after week to go down and play at Elm City Games, but I just never, I had excuses, never made it around to it. And since we've been all quarantined, I've actually started playing online with my family. So we play on Roll20.net, and we get on Zoom, and we're all learning the game at the same time. It's a lot of fun.
Has it been complicated to try Dungeons and Dragons online, Justin?
Yeah, it's really complicated. The first, because in our reading, everyone recommends you want to play with someone who's really experienced. So it's like 4 people who have no clue what we're doing, but we're all pretty good with rule systems, and I think we're figuring it out. We're starting our second adventure this Friday, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, we're glad that you're trying it, Justin. Thanks for calling in. So, Matt, fantastic. Break it down for us. You're a D&D player, a longtime D&D player. So, talk a little bit about the game for people who may not have played it and how to do it remotely.
Yeah, so Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game. It is widely considered to be the first role-playing game. It's now on its 5th edition of rules, so it's evolved since the early days in the mid 70s. And basically, the general setting is that it's sort of this kind of mismatch of fantasy. If you've played any role-playing games subsequently, or are familiar with even hearing of things like experience points, that is all from D&D. So if you're familiar with any of the sort of things that have come from it, you're going to have a pretty easy job with the core concepts. Like Justin said, having an experienced player be the dungeon master is really, really helpful, because basically the dungeon master is the one who has to really know all the rules. I can get people playing D&D in 5 minutes, because really what it is at its heart is collaborative storytelling. And the way that, all these rules exist more as a way to determine success or failure in various tasks. There might be a door, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to walk over and open the door. Great. And I just open the door because it's not locked, but maybe that door is locked. And now I'm going to say, well, I'm going to break it down, or I'm going to climb the wall to try to get in a window, or I'm going to pick the lock, or, use magic, or all these other things that I can do. And now I am trying to, quote unquote, defeat the door. And so there are rules that surround whether or not I will be successful. But really, again, at its heart, it's collaborative storytelling. We're just telling a story together. And so, speaking to Justin's experience and everybody else's, mine is, especially if you can't find an experienced dungeon master, start playing and you'll figure it out. The only way to do it wrong is to not have fun, really. Don't worry about the details, the minutia. You'll get there. Really, sit down, and whoever's the dungeon master says, there's a goblin. And then everybody else decides if they want to talk to that goblin or stab that goblin or whatever it is. And then, roll a couple dice and see what happens. That's really D&D at its heart. But again, if you want to go deep, you can read thousands of pages of, rules and flavor and, all this stuff. It's a massive system that you can go really, really deep into. But to just get started in it is, everybody kind of knows what to do already.
Mm. Well, the Where We Live crew is going to lean on you, Matt Fantastic, when we start up a game ourselves. I watched this great video from Vox about the whole point of Dungeons and Dragons. And in the video, they said, it's not about killing other players or winning. It's just about hanging out with friends and acting like weirdos together. Does that sum it up?
That's pretty much sums up my entire life. But yeah, exactly. It's this experience that you're having together. D&D is collaborative, right? Like if you are just trying to kill each other, you're not really gonna. It's not a very interesting game, right?
Definitely not.
Hey, I'm gonna stab you, and then maybe you're dead, and I guess go home. It's not really an exciting experience, right? So. You want to have adventures. You can certainly tell a variety of stories, including ones that are, darker in nature, more adult in nature, things like that, which is also one of the great things is the system is really flexible. You can tell a game for, 5 or 6 year olds, like when I was playing at first. You can tell games for the most adult, interesting, weird, not really killing stuff kind of experience. There's also all sorts of additional role-playing games like Kids on Bikes, where you are a bunch of kids running around in the 80s, sort of Stranger Things, Goonies-esque kind of setting, right? So there's a lot of different things that you can experience in that space. And also just locally, I will plug Elm City Games. The easiest way to, we're happy to teach people. I'm actually running a Dungeon Master workshop tomorrow, Saturday at 1 p.m. And that's open to anybody, members or not. Just send an email to hello@elmcitygames.com and we'll give you an invite to the Zoom where I'm going to tell everybody in more detail what to do.
Awesome. Well, we might be signing in as well. Matt Fantastic again, who's a game designer and co-owner of Elm City Games in New Haven, Connecticut. Stu's calling from Avon. Stu, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. We've been Zooming every Sunday night with my family, including my 88-year-old mom. She's done very well with code names. There's a free site for that. And then this week, I don't know if I can mention the website, Factile, where they have a Jeopardy game that you can plug in. So I set one up for this week with all our family trivia that only, stuff our family would know to kind of bring back some old stories and kind of favorite dishes that we like and things like that. So, do the typical Jeopardy thing. So we'll see how that plays out.
Well, thank you, Stu, for calling in. We're happy to hear about your Zoom trivia night with family trivia. That's a good idea. Before we head into the break, Matt, for people who are again interested in playing games virtually with Elm City Games, you mentioned learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons. But what are some other sessions that you run?
So we run regular Zoom, like sort of board game nights. That's typically on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. But if you send us an email, again, hello@elmcitygames.com, we can add people to the mailing list where we send out, invites. Because sometimes we're doing stuff that's not scheduled. Like I ended up playing Codenames with, Wavelength, which is another really brilliant game. I played that with a bunch of people just randomly in the afternoon a couple days ago. So if you want to get into the thing, we're running official events, but also if you're in the Facebook or the Discord, people are coordinating their own stuff in the community where you don't necessarily need us to specifically set it all up.
Matt, fantastic again, game designer and co-owner of Elm City Games in New Haven. Thanks, Matt. It was fun.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I've been listening to the show for 30 years or whatever. So this is pretty cool.
Well, we appreciate you calling in today. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Again, what games are you playing with family or friends while you continue social distancing? We want to hear from you. 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. After the break, we hear about Nintendo's Animal Crossing New Horizons. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we're talking about how people are having fun and staying connected while staying at home, from video games to Zoom board games and more. What are you playing these days? Join the conversation. 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Now, have you heard of Nintendo's Animal Crossing New Horizons? There's our next guest wrote a great piece about it. Elise Favis, reporter for Launcher, the Washington Post video game section. Elise, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're also with us via Zoom. We thank you for that. So talk a little bit first about Animal Crossing. I've never played, but this has been around since I think 2000, 2001?
Sure. This has been around since the early 2000s. The last game came out 8 years ago in Japan, 7 years ago in North America. So this is a life simulator. The core of the game really is about making money and then using that money to customize your town. So there's no real combat. There's no strategy necessarily. It's really about inhabiting this town, populating it with villagers, and hanging out with friends. So I think it's definitely become the essential quarantine item.
Nice. So Animal Crossing New Horizons, that came out, in the last year or two? And this has really just gone bonkers in terms of people's interest. And as you mentioned, playing a game that makes them feel good, not a lot of stress involved.
Right. It came out in late March, so it hasn't been too long at all.
Okay.
And actually, even in the month of March, it sold 5 million digital copies, and that's not counting physical copies in stores. So that's just digital alone, which is quite incredible.
So describe how this is set up exactly for people who haven't played yet. You have to have a Nintendo Switch to play?
Correct. Yes. So you need the Nintendo Switch system, and if you want to play online, you need a Switch subscription for online, and that can cost you a little bit under $20, I believe, for a year.
And so walk us through, again, a little bit about not only playing at home, but the fact that there's a way to connect with other people who are playing this game.
Yes. So the way it works is you're building your town and you're creating an island. And then you can visit other people's islands or host and have people come to your island. And you roam around the island together and you chat. And you it's kind of a fun way to show off what you've built. Because that's really the essence of Animal Crossing is the customization and working really hard to build the best town you can. So people are making these really idyllic islands, and some people are even actually holding events that they normally would have in real life, but the pandemic has halted those events, like weddings, for example. People are live streaming their weddings, having them in Animal Crossing, inviting all their friends. I have someone who held Ramadan actually in the game and just invited his friends, around a table.
That's really great. A great way to stay connected. We heard from Aisha, a ninth grader from West Haven, Connecticut. She explains why she plays Animal Crossing New Horizons.
I'm Aisha. I'm in ninth grade. So my village's name is Aisha and my town's name is Sunshore. One of my friends that lives out of state, we usually try and go to each other's villages and we trade fruit and things like that. Usually we talk over Discord. Oh, I just got something new from him. He's giving me medicine because I feel like Animal Crossing kind of brings a routine because there's not a set goal that you need to do, but every day there's usually something new to do. There's more bugs that spawn on your island daily, so it's there's always a reason to get on rather than just not doing anything.
So Elise Favis, we heard Aisha talk about the bugs that spawn on your island. So that's probably not a good thing?
Actually, it is.
Okay.
A big part of Animal Crossing is collecting. And you are collecting fossils, insects, fish. So you're doing all these little tasks around your island. Also collecting fruit and furniture and recipes to make those furniture. And some of those things you're donating to your museum, and it's just a way to showcase, almost like trophies, everything that you've done and completed. And I think Aisha brings up a really good point, actually, about routine. I know personally the way I've been keeping track of what day it is because of Animal Crossing. This is a game that progresses in real time. So, for example, you look outside your window in real life and say the sun is setting. The sun will be also setting, in your game. So it kind of keeps you on track, I think, when, we're all forgetting what time it is, what day it is with this pandemic.
Do you play Animal Crossing New Horizons? You can join our conversation, 888-720-WNPR. That's 888-720-9677. Maybe there's another video game that you want to talk about here on Where We Live. My guest today, again, is Elise Favis, reporter for Launcher, the Washington Post video game section. When we were talking with Matt earlier, and then you mentioned as well, mentioned Discord. Explain what that is exactly.
Sure. Discord is a way to voice chat and also text chat with friends. And a lot of people use it while they're playing video games. So not every game has a voice chat, for example. This is a good way. It's a computer application that you download. So it's a good way to keep in contact while gaming.
You also wrote up a piece about the do's and don'ts for people who are playing online games for the first time, etiquette especially for this game, New Horizons. Can you walk us through some of those do's and don'ts?
Yeah, absolutely. Animal Crossing is an interesting game because I think there is a certain etiquette involved when visiting other people's islands that's kind of different than other games. So obviously, as I mentioned before, this is a game where you're putting hours and hours. I mean, people are playing this for hundreds of hours already. And you put so much time into working on your island that it can be a little frustrating, I think, if someone comes to your island and tramples on your flowers, for example. And this can happen inadvertently because say you're just running through the island and you'll automatically stomp on those flowers and potentially ruin someone's garden. And I think what I've seen is people use emotes a lot as they visit one another's islands. And those are these little reactions that you collect. And, you can smile or you can cry. And you have these little reactions as you interact. So those are fun to use. There's little bulletin boards, so you can almost use it like a guest book. And people can leave their thoughts there and what they thought of your island. You
can join us, 888-720-9677. Even if you're not playing video games, but you want to talk about what games people should be playing, especially as we all still socially distance. Thomas is calling from New York. Thomas, go ahead. Thomas, are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead. You're on the show.
I think one of the greatest games of all times is chess, and unlike many games like bridge, which is highly abstract, chess is easy to learn. I learned when I was 5, and I got fairly good enough and won a prize when I was 17 in the U.S. Junior Chess Championship, and it's a tremendous intellectual challenge. Be able to plan ahead, to anticipate what your opponent is doing. I think it's really the king of all games. There's no finer game, and I would encourage people to play it. And contrary to many people, it's easy to learn how to play. Maybe not so easy to get good, but I certainly would suggest that you learn if you are interested.
Well, thank you, Thomas, for that, and congratulations for playing so well or when you were younger. Thomas, again, calling in to talk about chess. So, Elise, we're talking with you about video games. Are there some other video games that include that chess-like strategy that you would recommend for people?
Sure. I really like XCOM. It has a kind of chess-like maneuver to it. Where you have squad mates and you're moving across a grid, and each squad mate has a certain move that they can do, and you're going against an enemy force. So I think that's probably the best example when he brings up chess. There are several strategy games out there. Civilization is one of them. The Warhammer series is another. But I think looking at Animal Crossing, it definitely takes that out of the equation and is much more a relaxing, slow-paced game. And I think the reason why people are moving towards it so much right now is it really gives you a sense of control during the pandemic, where you are, creating that town and making money, and everything's kind of just, it's all up to you, and you can just go at your own pace.
It was interesting when you mentioned earlier that people are having weddings on Animal Crossings. We think about milestones that people may not be able to have this year, like graduations. People are using Minecraft as well for that. Elise?
Oh, yes. Minecraft is a wildly popular game, particularly with kids, but also across all ages. And it's interesting with Minecraft because the University of Georgia is actually planning to have their graduation within the game, primed with an entire virtual stadium. So that is wonderful. It's an online game, so everyone can go into this digital space and experience an event together. And there are students in Japan that did that as well. And also educators and teachers are turning towards games, particularly Minecraft, because it has a very robust education mode that offers lesson plans to teachers. So you're seeing things as, maybe simple as, second or third grade math to something as complex as cellular biology.
Stuart's calling from New Hartford. Stuart, you're on the show.
Yeah, hi. I've been a big fan of yours, Lucy. I've been listening for quite a while, every 9 o'clock. Anyway,
Thanks.
I call myself kind of a internet artist because I've started an online global arts village called Persona Land. And we've been showing artists. We've shown over 200 artists from nearly 34 countries in our art shows, but we've also started these art games, which are now being used by a number of teachers for online learning with their students that are homebound.
Nice. And for our listeners, Stuart, for our listeners who want to learn more about your online global art village and these games, how do they find you and find out more information?
Well, it's called personaland.com.
Okay.
And there's no charges involved. There's a game called Name the Artist, which is kind of fun. You get a famous picture with only one image of it, and 1/9 of the picture, and then you get one clue about the artist, and then if you can't answer that one, you just ask for another clue, and you get graded by how many clues you need to figure out who the artist is.
Well, that sounds great. I'm going to have my kids look that up. Thank you, Stuart, for calling in, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lucy.
Before we let you go, Elise Favis, again, reporter for Launcher, the Washington Post video game section. Not everybody has a Nintendo or PlayStation console. Quickly, with people with computers, what are some games that you'd recommend they play during this pandemic?
Sure. I definitely recommend social games. So Overwatch is a shooter that I think has generally a low barrier to entry. And that's a great one. It's team-based, so you can play with friends, hop on easily on that. I actually recommend Legends of Runeterra. It's a digital card game that came out yesterday, and that's also a fun one. There's no in-game chat there, but you can hop on, Discord or FaceTime and play with a friend that way. Call of Duty Modern Warfare, they had their release of Warzone, which is a particular mode for Battle Royale. And that basically means you are playing against a ton of other people in this space, the space that is slowly shrinking. And you are trying to be the last man standing. And since March, they've had over 50 million players taking part. So that's quite an incredible game, too.
Well, Animal Crossing New Horizons sounds more like my style, Elise. Thank you, though, for that recommendation. Again, she's reporter for Launcher, the Washington Post video game section. We'll make sure we tweet out some links to your stories and the recommendations that you gave us. Thanks, Elise, for joining Where We Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up, maybe board games and Nintendo aren't your thing. NPR TV critic Eric Deggans has his recommendations on what to watch right after the break. You can join us too, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up Monday, Stamford, Connecticut has the largest number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the state. On the next Where We Live, we'll talk to the Stamford Mayor, David Martin. Also, we'll hear from Secretary of the State, Denise Merrill, who wants Connecticut lawmakers to allow more residents to vote by mail. You can join us. That's Monday. Now, today, what are you watching these days? Binge watching may not be so easy when the whole family is stuck at home and there's work and school assignments to do, but a little decompression time is not a bad thing. To help you figure out what to watch these days, joining us on Zoom, Eric Deggans, television critic for NPR. Eric, welcome back to our show.
Thanks for having me.
So last time we spoke, it was a few months ago, we were talking about Disney Plus and Apple Streaming Plus and wondering if people were going to be signing on. I hate to say it, but is the pandemic the best thing to happen to these streaming services?
In a way. Netflix is definitely the big winner here. They don't have commercials, so they don't have to worry about the fact that advertisers are spending less money on commercials. They have this huge library that people now have a lot of time to explore. And they've seen their subscriptions go up by 16 million subscribers in the first quarter of this year. Mm-hmm. And they claim that they worked far enough in advance that they've already filmed a lot of the new shows that are going to roll out this year, and they can assemble them remotely, even though people are working from home. They can edit them and do the post-production work that they need to do from people's homes. So they don't expect to have any of their major releases, for example, delayed, like the fourth season of The Crown, which is scheduled to debut this fall. So Netflix came out, I think, on top. Some of these other services, there's one called Quibi, for example, that is based on 10-minute increments, right? You know, every episode or every show is only 10 minutes long or less. And that the idea there was that, you know, people are on the go, they're commuting, they're waiting in line, they're, at the dentist or something, and you can pull up Quibi and you can watch something short. Well, everybody's stuck at home now. Nobody's online anywhere. People aren't going into work. And so that service debuted in early April. And, people kind of shrugged because they don't really have a need for that kind of entertainment right now. So, depending on what kind of streaming service it is, they've done well or they've done not so well.
We heard from a listener, Dan, on Twitter. He writes, beyond rewatching all the Star Wars and Marvel movies on Disney Plus, my teens love watching Connecticut's own Charlie D'Amelio on TikTok and working on dance moves. 52 million followers, all from her home in Norwalk. So it sounds like Disney Plus is popular at his home, Eric.
Yeah, Disney Plus. Well, again, this is a streaming service that had a huge library, and it's a lot of it is family-friendly content. So when school is out, school's not meeting, and you've got kids at home, and you've got to amuse them, Disney Plus is a great alternative. But I also like this idea. Your caller is, or your caller is a man after my own heart. Watching all the Marvel stuff and the Disney stuff, but also watching something like TikTok. And so what we've seen is on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram Live, some of these social media services, we've seen performers go on there and do special things that you can't see anywhere else. So Babyface and another well-known producer sort of had a battle where they each played hit songs that they were known for. Teddy Riley is the other producer, and they had hits. They had a battle where they played hit songs and tried to top each other. Oh, well, I did this song that was more popular. No, I did this song that was more popular, and everybody watched it on Instagram Live. And we've seen great DJs like D Nice or Questlove do these long DJ sets on YouTube or on Instagram Live, and people have been checking those things out. So it's been interesting to see how performers have used the fact that they're sequestered to come up with new ways of speaking to their fans and presenting new products to people.
Speaking of new ways, what was your take on Saturday Night Live, again, producing new content from home, not live, but what was your assessment? Was it strange to see it pieced together like that?
I mean, in one way it was strange, but in another way, it's sort of the whole mission of the show, that whole let's put on a show and let's, take this very sort of specific situation that we're in that has a lot of limitations. Normally it's the fact that it's live, but now it's the fact that everybody is in their homes and they have to figure out a way to create new environments. And I think they've done two of them, and the first one was wonderful just because they tried it. And some of the stuff wasn't necessarily the funniest things I'd ever seen, but the fact that they were experimenting, that they were trying, and that they wanted to present something to people was really great. And of course, seeing Tom Hanks, after he had his coronavirus diagnosis, seeing him healthy and joking and in his home was a great boost. The second time they did it, you could tell that they had figured out how to do things a little better. The backgrounds that they figured out, were better. Some of the sketches, I think, were funnier. They had Brad Pitt, playing Anthony Fauci, which was a stroke of genius. He was really great. And so you got the sense that they're figuring out how to do a Saturday Night Live under these new circumstances. And it's a creative act. Watching a creative act in motion like that is a really powerful thing. And I think it's something that people are really hungry for at a time when there's so much bad news and there's so many depressing things going on. It's great to see great artists trying to pull something off and mostly pulling it off.
Mm-hmm. You're hearing Eric Deggans on Zoom today here on Where We Live, television critic for NPR. We definitely want to hear some of your recommendations of what to watch. But first, we wanted to ask you about Never Have I Ever with Mindy Kaling as executive producer. This is the context includes a girl named Devi. She's a 15-year-old Indian American girl. Her and her friends are nerds, and they decide this is going to be the school year that they're going to be cool. Let's play a little clip.
Which brings me to my plan. This year, we're rebranding. We are glamorous women of color who deserve a sexy high school life.
So have you been watching this, Eric?
I have been, and I really like it. Netflix has teed up a lot of series that are sort of coming of age stories, but they've done it in a sort of with a look at the modern teen. And so we've gotten a look at a lot of different kinds of teenage kids coming of age. And this story is different because the lead character is Indian American. Her mother is much more traditional. And in fact, I think they have a cousin who the mother is pressuring to get into an arranged marriage. But this 15-year-old wants to also live in the modern world and live in the American world. And so she's a child of two different cultures, and she's navigating that. Also, her father died not long ago, and she's seeing a therapist for that. And so a lot of things that kids are going through, but also things that are very culturally specific. So this story feels unique, even though it's touching on a lot of things that a lot of kids go through. The only thing I noticed, and I mention this every time I talk about this show, is that I think Netflix also tries to distinguish its coming of age stories by making them very sexual. So one of the things that this character is doing is she wants to lose her virginity. Now, I don't know how some parents will feel about watching a show like that with their kids, but this is something that we've seen Netflix do in shows like Atypical or The End of the Effing World or 13 Reasons Why. These are all shows that are focused on teens that are kind of coming of age in different ways, but they also have some very mature material in there about sex and about, hanging out and partying and things like that. And so, some parents might want to be careful and watch the show a little bit and see if their kid is ready to see something like that, or if they're ready for their kid to see something like that. But I really love the show, and I really enjoy watching it, and I've been recommending it to anybody who'll listen.
So that's Netflix's Never Have I Ever. We've got about 3 minutes left, Eric. So tell us a couple more of your recommendations.
Wow, a couple more. Okay, so Better Call Saul was really great this year. This is a spinoff from Breaking Bad, where we see Walter White's attorney sort of become the shyster to the drug dealers that he becomes in Breaking Bad. It's become a show that's, I think, almost better than Breaking Bad. The 5th season just wrapped up, so you can go back and you can watch all the episodes from the 5th season. It's really great. The Last Dance, ESPN has this wonderful documentary on Michael Jordan's last championship season with the Chicago Bulls. It's very detailed. It's something for the sports fan who wants to see sports, and there's no sports on TV. But it's also great for people who don't know sports that much or don't even care about sports that much, because it's very much about the 90s, and it's very much about where we all were culturally then. So that's definitely worth checking out. I know a lot of people have criticized Tiger King, but man, I really enjoy watching it. And
what about Ozark? Ozark, I love it.
Ozark on Netflix. Well, I'm trying to spread stuff around. I don't want to just talk about Netflix, but yeah, Ozark's last season was really great. And I also want to talk about Parks and Recreation. That comedy did a reboot episode last night that was based on everybody, all the performers were in there sequestered in their homes, and they used video chat and different devices to kind of piece together an episode, which was very touching and well done. But the series itself is about the lead character, Leslie Knope, this woman who works in a public works department in a small town in Indiana. She believes in the power of government to help people and to bring people together in a positive way. And I think that's a message that we kind of need to see right now. And so not only is Parks and Rec just a really funny series that people should binge anyway, but the message of the show is something that I think we need to hear right now. And I think people would enjoy checking it out. So that's another one of my recommendations. Watch the special that just aired. You can probably see it on NBC.com, and then binge watch the old episodes.
Well, thank you so much, Eric Deggans. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Television critic for NPR. I now know what I can try to watch on the next rainy day. We appreciate your time. Have a great weekend, Eric.
All right. Thank you.
Today's show produced by Carmen Baskoff. Tess Terrible on the phones. Our technical producer is Kat Pastor. You can learn more about Where We Live. Just download the show on your favorite podcast app. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.